Shedeur Sanders has become the obsession of New York's front office, a young quarterback painted as the savior who could finally end years of disappointment. The Jets' relentless push to pry him from Cleveland feels less like a trade negotiation and more like a plea for redemption. They've watched their hopes crumble season after season, and Sanders represents the promise of a clean slate, a new identity.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But what they didn't expect was the wall of resistance from the Browns, led by Kevin Stefanski, who refuses to surrender control or admit his team's role in creating the circus. That tension between desperation and defiance has created one of the NFL's most volatile storylines. The Browns' inflated demand for a second-round pick has exposed a deeper dysfunction within the organization, a need to prove superiority rather than make sound decisions. Meanwhile, the Jets' eagerness has turned into public spectacle, with fans clinging to every leak and rumor. Stefanski's cryptic tone and the team's chaotic handling of Sanders reveal a franchise more consumed by ego than strategy, leaving both sides trapped in a cycle of mistrust as the trade deadline looms. Kevin Stefanski just dropped a verbal grenade, and now the entire NFL is in absolute freefall. Shedeur Sanders' name is being tossed around in every corner of the league, and the drama surrounding his potential trade to the New York Jets is pure chaos. We're talking front office egos, confused press conferences, social media meltdowns, and two franchises going toe-to-toe in a high-stakes standoff. And if you think any of this is being handled with grace or logic, you haven't been paying attention. Let's start with the basics. The New York Jets are obsessed. Not just curious. Obsessed. Their interest in Shedeur Sanders has gone from casual scouting to full-on franchise savior fantasy. They see him as the golden ticket, a quarterback who could finally turn the tide for a team that's been stuck in purgatory for way too long. It doesn't matter that Sanders is still largely unproven in the NFL. It doesn't matter that he hasn't had real starting reps. The Jets want him. Badly. And then you've got Cleveland, a team that, instead of developing Sanders and seeing what they've got, has essentially let him rot on the bench. Barely used, consistently overlooked, and now suddenly being marketed as a premium trade asset. Their asking price? A second-round pick. For a guy they refuse to play. It's delusional, and everyone knows it. Kevin Stefanski's role in all this? Honestly, he's made it worse. His press conferences have become a spectacle all on their own. Every time he's asked about Sanders or the trade rumors, it's the same routine. Vague, robotic, defensive. He's mastered the art of saying nothing while pretending he said everything. And people are tired of it. Fans, reporters, and probably even the players. Because when your head coach can't give a straight answer about one of the most talked about situations in the league, it doesn't come off as strategic. It looks weak. The Browns have painted themselves into a corner. They won't play Sanders, but they also won't trade him unless someone overpays. And it's that stubbornness, that refusal to admit missteps or make a decisive move, that's become the real issue. It's not about Shedeur Sanders anymore. It's about pride, ego, power dynamics behind closed doors. And the fans? They're over it. Cleveland's base is watching this whole situation unravel with growing frustration. The team's inability to develop young talent, their confusing roster decisions, their constant refusal to adapt. It's all coming to a head. And the Sanders situation is just the latest symptom of a deeper problem. Meanwhile, Jets fans are on the opposite emotional roller coaster. They're hopeful. Desperate, sure, but hopeful. They see Sanders as a reset button. A shot in the dark that might actually pay off. And they're willing to take the risk. But Cleveland? They're holding the deal hostage, acting like they're sitting on a gold mine, even though they won't dig it up. This whole saga has become theater, a media circus, a living, breathing NFL soap opera. And at the center of it is a player who's barely seen the field and a coach who refuses to explain why. Every day that goes by without clarity only adds more fuel to the fire. Social media is flooded with memes, wild speculation, and fans from both sides shouting into the void. What makes this so maddening is how unnecessary it all feels. Sanders hasn't even been given a chance. Injuries, play calling gaps, and roster openings have all come and gone. And still no Shedeur. It's not about development anymore. It's about internal politics. Stefanski's refusal to integrate Sanders into the offense isn't based on merit. It's rooted in something deeper. Whether it's about control, insecurity, or just pure stubbornness, the result is the same: wasted potential and growing internal tension. You can feel it. The team's vibe is off. Players see what's going on. They know when management is playing games. When someone with talent is being held back for reasons that don't make football sense. That kind of tension builds. It seeps into the locker room. It fractures morale. And the timing couldn't be worse. With a trade deadline approaching, pressure is mounting on all sides. Stefanski is under the microscope. Every cryptic quote, every dodged question, every awkward shrug, it's all being picked apart. The Browns are acting like they're in control, but in reality, they've lost the plot. The longer they hold out, the more chaotic it gets. And still, they refuse to pivot. They won't start Sanders. They won't lower their asking price. They just sit in this bizarre limbo, convinced that they're making some kind of power move, when all they're really doing is sabotaging themselves. It's not just about failing to develop a young QB. It's about misreading the room, misjudging leverage, and grossly overestimating your own position. The NFL moves fast. Teams with clear plans move faster. And right now, Cleveland is stuck spinning in circles, while the Jets, for all their desperation, at least look like they know what they want. Stefanski's leadership, or lack thereof, has become symbolic of the Browns' deeper dysfunction. This is a team that projects confidence while internally unraveling. A franchise trying to act calculated while clearly scrambling behind the scenes. And when that dissonance is obvious to fans, media, and other teams, it's game over. So what now? They either move Sanders and accept the best offer they can get, or they face the even messier option, keeping him in the building with no role, no plan, and no future. That kind of uncertainty eats away at a team. And if they let the trade deadline pass without clarity, the fallout won't just be external. It'll hit the locker room, too. This is bigger than Shedeur Sanders. It's about whether the Browns can get out of their own way long enough to make a smart, strategic move. Right now, all signs point to no. And if they're not careful, they'll watch this opportunity slip away, just like so many others before it. Let us know what you think. Is Cleveland bluffing? Or are they really this disconnected from reality? Should the Jets go all in? Or is this a case of too much hype too soon? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're following the chaos like it's the NFL's version of Succession. And don't forget to subscribe for more of the drama you actually care about. Because with the way this saga's playing out, something tells us the final twist is still on the way. At this point, it's not even about football anymore. It's about the Browns turning a quarterback dilemma into a full-blown franchise crisis. You've got Kevin Stefanski stonewalling reporters, Shedeur Sanders being dangled like a luxury item no one's allowed to touch, and an entire fan base teetering on the edge of mutiny. And with every press conference that ends in cryptic silence, it becomes more obvious. Cleveland has no idea what it's doing. The New York Jets, meanwhile, are practically foaming at the mouth. They're not even hiding it. Their interest in Sanders has morphed into a public obsession, the kind that screams, "We'll take anything better than what we've got." And honestly, you can't blame them. They've been burned by so many quarterback experiments, they're practically begging for anyone, with promise. To them, Shedeur isn't just a prospect. He's a fresh start. But here's the insanity. The Browns are holding him hostage. They're demanding a second-round pick for a quarterback they refuse to play. It's like refusing to open a gift, then acting offended when someone offers to take it off your hands. There's no football logic here. It's pride, plain and simple. Pride that's blinding Cleveland to the opportunity in front of them. And Kevin Stefanski? He's not helping. His responses and pressers are textbook evasion. Vague phrases like "we're focused on the next game" or "he's a part of this team" don't mean anything when your actions say the opposite. The longer he avoids direct answers, the more the noise builds. It's reached a point where the press room feels less like a football environment and more like a courtroom. Everyone waiting for the coach to finally crack under pressure. Stefanski's silence is speaking volumes, and what it's saying is this: there's something going on behind the scenes that they don't want to admit. Whether it's a fractured relationship with Sanders, internal disagreements in the front office, or a refusal to admit a personnel mistake, none of it adds up. Because if Sanders is truly worth a second-round pick, then why hasn't he played a single meaningful snap? This is where the dysfunction shows its face. You don't get to demand high value for a player you don't value internally. You don't get to bury a rookie, then act like you've developed a star. The league sees through it. Other GMs see through it. And most importantly, the fans definitely see through it. Cleveland fans aren't just frustrated, they're embarrassed. Embarrassed by the mixed messaging, the stubborn leadership, and the ongoing parade of decisions that feel more like theater than strategy. The fact that the Browns are turning this into such a dramatic, drawn-out mess says everything about the state of the franchise. They're trying to project control, but the more they talk, the more unhinged it all seems. And the timing couldn't be worse. The trade deadline is right around the corner. Other teams are making moves, shuffling rosters, building towards something. Meanwhile, Cleveland is stuck playing poker with a hand they clearly don't know how to use. They're bluffing hard, and the rest of the league knows it. Every day they stall, they lose leverage. Every time Stefanski ducks a question, they lose credibility. And every time Sanders sits on the bench, they risk turning a valuable asset into a complete afterthought. Let's be honest here, this isn't a rebuild. It's a standoff. A slow, stubborn standoff between what Cleveland wants the world to believe and what the reality actually is. They want you to think they're holding strong, that they've got a calculated plan, that Shedeur Sanders is part of a bigger long-term vision. But nothing about this situation reflects that. Because what kind of long-term vision involves not playing your young quarterback, not trading him, and not being honest about it? And the locker room? They feel it too. You don't think veterans on that roster are questioning the logic? You don't think players are looking at the situation and wondering who's really calling the shots? When a team mismanages talent this badly, it creates ripple effects. It damages morale. It fractures trust. It tells everyone that merit isn't the currency, that ego is. Meanwhile, over in New York, the Jets are practically refreshing their phones every 5 minutes. They've made their interest clear. They're aggressive. They're hungry. And while some might call that desperation, it's at least a form of direction. They've chosen a path. The Browns, on the other hand, are standing in the middle of a freeway with no GPS and no idea which lane to take. It's laughable how Cleveland is acting like they hold all the cards. You've got a QB with minimal experience, zero in-game development, and a team actively undermining his value. And yet they're pricing him like he's already proved himself. You cannot hold out for elite compensation when your actions scream indecisiveness and dysfunction. The NFL doesn't reward that kind of posturing. It punishes it. And what makes it worse is how transparent it all is. The fans know this isn't about strategy. It's about saving face. The Browns are terrified of admitting they didn't handle Sanders the right way. Terrified of giving him up and watching him flourish elsewhere. But guess what? That fear is exactly what's holding them back. While other teams evolve, Cleveland is too busy playing not to lose. This whole ordeal has become a case study in how not to manage a young quarterback. You don't stash someone with potential, refuse to play them, demand a high trade price, and then act shocked when the media starts peeling back the layers. You don't stonewall your fan base and expect loyalty in return. And you definitely don't let a trade rumor hijack your entire identity. But that's exactly what's happened. The Browns aren't just mishandling Shedeur Sanders, they're mishandling their brand, their reputation, their credibility in the league. This one situation has pulled the curtain back on how deeply disorganized things really are. And Kevin Stefanski, whether he realizes it or not, has become the face of that disorganization. His refusal to speak plainly, to own the moment, to lead, that's the biggest bombshell of all. The fact that Cleveland's own head coach is acting more like a gatekeeper than a decision-maker says everything you need to know. So now, with the clock ticking and the league watching, the Browns are at a crossroads. Do they finally take action, trade Sanders, or give him the reps and prove he's worth keeping? Or do they keep playing the same game of deflection and delay, hoping no one calls their bluff? Because one way or another, the truth is going to surface. The question is whether Cleveland wants to be in control when it does, or be left cleaning up the fallout when it all explodes. Just when you think it couldn't get any messier, Cleveland keeps digging. Instead of pulling back, taking accountability, or showing any sense of urgency as the trade deadline looms, the Browns have decided to double down on chaos. It's almost impressive, in a car crash you can't look away from kind of way. Kevin Stefanski continues standing in front of cameras with a straight face, saying absolutely nothing while the building around him metaphorically smolders. Because here's the reality. No matter what spin the Browns try to put on it, this entire Shedeur Sanders situation has exposed them completely. Every cryptic quote, every unrealistic trade demand, every refusal to commit, it all points to the same undeniable truth. Cleveland has no coherent plan. Not for Sanders, not for the season, and not for a locker room that's probably wondering why its leaders are more focused on optics than outcomes. Let's not sugarcoat it. They've boxed themselves in. The second they put that second-round pick price tag on Sanders, they made a statement, one they clearly didn't think through. Because if Sanders is worth that much, then why isn't he playing? Why hasn't he been developed, featured, or at the very least, rotated in during injuries and offensive slumps? The answer is what everyone's afraid to say out loud. The Browns don't trust their own decision-making. And rather than admit to mishandling Sanders or re-evaluating their stance, they're doing what dysfunctional franchises always do, pretending they're in control when they're clearly spiraling. And the league sees it. The media sees it. The fans definitely see it. Across social media, it's turned into a full-blown roast. Memes mocking Cleveland's inflated sense of leverage. Commentators dragging Stefanski's evasive interviews. Side-by-side clips of other teams moving with precision while the Browns stumble through the most unnecessarily complicated quarterback situation in recent memory. And let's talk about the emotional toll, because this isn't just strategic fumble, it's a morale killer. You've got a locker room full of players watching the front office refuse to commit. Coaches are visibly uneasy. The fans are restless. And Shedeur? He's caught in the middle of a PR disaster, unsure whether he's the future trade bait or just a pawn in a power struggle. Meanwhile, the Jets are practically sprinting toward the negotiation table. Their pursuit has been loud, clear, and borderline obsessive. And honestly, good for them. At least they know what they want. They're not hiding behind vague statements or hiding players from the public. They want Sanders, and they're not afraid to let the world know. The difference in approach couldn't be starker. One team is decisive, maybe a little desperate, sure, but decisive. The other is flailing, masking fear with arrogance, trying to pretend they're negotiating from a position of strength when they're actually dangling from the edge. And Stefanski, whether he intended to or not, has become the symbol of that disconnect. His refusal to say anything real has become its own story. Every non-answer adds to the spectacle. At this point, he could walk into a press conference and read from a phone book, and it would still spark 24 hours of "what does it mean" coverage. Because silence is a message. And the one Cleveland's sending right now is, "We don't know what to do." It's stunning how quickly this all unraveled. What should have been a routine internal decision, evaluate a young quarterback, develop him, decide his future, has exploded into a public referendum on how the Browns operate as a franchise. And the verdict so far? Not great. They're not just failing to manage a player. They're failing to manage the perception of the team. And in a league like the NFL, where image and control are currency, that's a fatal error. The Browns have made it very clear. They'd rather look strong than be smart. They could have traded Sanders weeks ago and gotten a decent return. They could have played him in a few strategic situations, shown off his potential, and shifted the leverage in their favor. Instead, they did neither. They sat still. They let the story run away from them. And now, they're being dragged behind it. And let's be real, they're not just gambling with Shedeur's future. They're gambling with everyone's: Stefanski's job security, the front office's credibility, and the trust of a fan base that's already been burned too many times. What's tragic is how avoidable this all was. The Browns didn't need to turn this into a 3-act drama. They just needed to lead, to make a call, to own a decision. But they didn't. They overvalued a player they underused, overplayed their hand, and now they're stuck watching the narrative collapse under its own weight. And the deeper question everyone's asking now: what else is Cleveland hiding? Because if this is how they handle one quarterback negotiation, what does that say about the rest of the organization? What does that say about how decisions are made, who's really in charge, and how far they're willing to go to avoid admitting they got it wrong? The Browns have turned indecision into an art form, and not the good kind. Meanwhile, the NFL moves on. Other teams are adjusting, innovating, and staying nimble. Cleveland, by contrast, is staring at the trade deadline like a deer in headlights, hoping something magically resolves itself. And the saddest part? By the time they figure out what to do, it might be too late. If they keep Sanders, they've got to deal with the consequences. Fans demanding he plays, veterans asking why he's benched, a media storm that won't go away. If they trade him now, after all the noise, they'll likely get less than what they asked for, and look even more disorganized in the process. It's a lose-lose that they created themselves. No one else did this to them. They backed themselves into this corner by refusing to lead. So here we are. The trade deadline is hours, maybe days away. The clock is ticking. The headlines are relentless. The fan base is on edge. And Shedeur Sanders, somehow still on the roster, is the center of a storm that only grows louder with silence. So what happens now? Does Cleveland finally pull the trigger and send Sanders to a team that actually wants him? Or do they keep pretending there's some brilliant master plan unfolding behind the scenes, even as the house crumbles? If you've made it this far, you already know the answer. Because the Browns have shown us who they are. And unless something changes fast, this whole debacle is going to be remembered not as a minor misstep, but as a defining moment in yet another wasted season. Like this, if you're watching the madness unfold with popcorn in hand, share it with someone still clinging to the belief that the Browns are playing 4D chess. And drop your thoughts in the comments. Should they finally set Sanders free, or is this just Cleveland being Cleveland? And hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. Because if there's one thing the NFL never runs out of, it's teams turning opportunity into catastrophe.